Hello everyone. In this video discussion, I shall be discussing about the external and internal changes in the English language. Through times, you might have wondered about the different changes that underwent in the English language. And these changes in the Old English language greatly affected the current language or version of the English language that we have. So, to begin, let us talk about language variety. If you notice, we have different varieties of the English language. We have the Philippine English to start with. We also have the American, the British, and the Australian English. In other parts of the world, we also have other Englishes being spoken. For example, the Chinese English, which is famously known as Chinglish, and we also have the Singaporean English, which is also known as the Singlish. All of these varieties of English language vary because they have differences not only in terms of phonology or pronunciation, but also in terms of structure. So this video discussion is designed to tell you the differences among these language varieties and also to focus or center more on the internal and the external changes which also affected the modern English language that we have. So in terms of varieties, linguists often distinguish among varieties of region, social class, and register or level of formality. Now we know that the varieties of language heavily depend on the social class. For example, for sociolex, okay, so we have English or languages spoken for, let's say, members of the LGBT community. So they have a specific language spoken. When you go to the virtual world, when you go with, for example, those who are fond of online games, they also have their own registers. And so, distinctions among the languages used happen. And that is where varieties come in. There are also varieties in terms of the level of formality being used, depending on the register used by people. Now, since we are talking about language varieties, then we are also introduced to sociolinguistics, which is a branch of linguistics that is particularly interested in these language varieties. And since we are talking about the varieties here, might as well talk about the internal and the external changes that happen in the English language, which also cause the variations of not only in phonology, but also in other linguistic aspects. Let's start with external changes. External changes, these are politically, geographically, and socially motivated changes. Now, before, there were significant political and social events that also contributed to the different changes in the English language. Now, these are external changes. We also have geographical because in the history, there had been migrations or immigrations happening among countries, which also contributed to the use of the language and also the dominance of a language in a specific geographical location. External changes are also brought by language contact, innovations by speakers, or issues of political or social identity. Okay? For example, in the Philippine setting, before, the Spanish language was considered to be, during the Spanish regime, the Spanish language was considered to be the language of the elite because for them, Spanish are highly educated. But when the Americans already invaded the Philippines, American English became the medium of instruction among institutions. Although there were still instances when Spanish was really dominant in some instructions because Spanish was, or most texts before were written in the Spanish language, the Americans brought to us the English language, which became the medium of instruction in the different levels of the academe. Innovations of speakers, for example, coined terms, could have also contributed to these external changes. We also have the fact that external changes were unpredictable because it is impossible to foresee who will migrate where or what fashion will catch on, right? For example, when the Spanish came into the Philippines, or when the Spaniards rather came into the Philippines, they brought not only their culture but also their language. And that significantly impacted the language used by the Filipinos. As a matter of fact, even until now, we have remnants of the Spanish language being used in our very own Filipino language. We also have Chavacano in Zamboanga, wherein the language itself is composed of Spanish loanwords. We also have internal changes. These are linguistically motivated changes. It may have to do with ease of articulation. So people before had to manipulate linguistic features for the reason that they wanted to have that ease of articulation. They want everything to be simpler. So they simplified everything, including the linguistic features of the English language. Languages often change towards what requires less effort, right? For example, when we use contractions, instead of saying, I cannot attend the seminar, we simply say, I can't attend the seminar, because we believe that the usage of the contraction can't will ease our effort, or will ease us from the effort that we should exert when saying, I cannot. Okay? And then ease is only one possible factor, because these internal changes could also have other factors. Internal changes also occur when speakers stop using endings or inflections. And this was highly evident in the Old English, because Old English really is a variety of the English language wherein a lot of inflections are present in most words. And these inflections commonly occur on verbs and nouns. And there were also changes in terms of being reliant on words such as of, for, the, and have, which are also common features of the Old English. There have been also stress shift. For example, now in the modern English, we can determine whether a word is a noun or a verb. For example, the word permit, permit. Now, there is this so-called stress shift once or depending on the part of speech. For example, if it is a noun, such as in the word permit, the stress is on the first syllable. On one hand, if you say permit, which is a verb, the stress is on the second syllable. To show you clearly the differences between these external and internal changes, this table now contains some information which could help you understand the difference between Old and Modern English. For example, in terms of external changes, there have been new words due to contact, language contact. For example, a culture before went in contact with another culture, and then they communicated or conversed with one another, and then words were taken or absorbed from another culture, and then later on these words were used on a daily basis in their speech community. For example, words like capybara and cashew. Okay. We also have new words due to social change. So instead of from the word adolescent, it later on evolved to adolescent. Okay, or adult. And then we have over sharenting. And then words going out of fashion, such as the use of the word cool. And then for internal changes, these changes happen because of the people's want for ease of articulation. So they use contractions. Okay? So they regularize as well, such as by saying, I should have went, instead of saying, I should have went. And then there was also new use of old words, such as the use of the word like as a complementizer. This time, let's talk about external influences on English and pre-English. In 55 BCE, Julius Caesar came to Britain, and in 43 CE, Emperor Claudius led an army of 40,000 and eventually subdued the people of what is now England, excluding those in Scotland and Wales. So there was invasion, and then, despite this one, Celtic remained spoken. When Germanic tribes began to settle in Britain around 450, now this is where geographical shifts or geographical factors come in. When Germanic tribes began to settle in Britain around 450, the Germanic dialects eventually pushed out the Celtic languages to the periphery. That is why the Germanic dialects, one of these is the English language, came into the spotlight. In the 6th century, the conversion to Christianity introduced Latin words into English. Because English, when you review the language family tree, is under the Germanic dialect, you could see there that English later on was influenced by both Latin and French languages. So it was during the 6th century that Latin played an important role because of the conversion of people to Christianity. Because of that, Latin words were introduced to the English words, and then there were now loan words coming from Latin and then later on absorbed to the English language. Between the 8th and 10th centuries, the Scandinavian raided Britain and started extensive settlements. And because of this, Scandinavian also had a big impact on the English language. Scandinavian may be the most important of the external influences on English grammar and vocabulary. Now, the disappearance of Old English endings, the inflections at the end of the words, and the switch to a stricter word order, because modern English is much stricter when it comes to syntax or the structure or the word order. This might be a result of Scandinavian influence on the grammar. In 1066, William of Normandy arrived and defeated Harold during the Battle of Hastings. As a result, French became the language of the nobility and the court, and much new vocabulary was introduced. So if Latin was introduced to the English language and later on contributed some loan words to the English vocabulary because of religious conversion, so from their religion to Christianity, French came in because of political reasons. It was when William Normandy arrived and defeated Harold during the Battle of Hastings. This is highly political in nature. And this external influence has also greatly affected the stock or pile of words in the English vocabulary. That is why if we review our English lexicon, there are a lot of words there which are heavily influenced by French or which are etymologically French. So in this discussion, I have discussed or I have given you an idea with regard to the external and internal changes in the English language. I hope you have fully understood everything here, most especially when it comes to these external influences and how history contributed to the development or evolution of the English language. Now, it's very important to always trace back history so that we, living in the modern times, could also understand what happened in the past that greatly contributed to the language that we are using now, which is the English language. Now, if you have questions about this brief discussion, kindly post them in the open forum. Thank you very much.